The Crusades were one of the most defining events in history, a clash of civilizations that shaped the world as we know it. Imagine the ringing bells in the great cathedrals of Europe, the fiery voices of preachers calling upon kings and commoners to embark on a holy war, and the promise of redemption etched into the hearts of thousands of warriors. These were times of unshakable faith and bloody battles, where conviction and the sword became one. The echoes of the Crusades still resonate today, influencing politics, culture, and religion, proving that this medieval conflict was not confined to the past but continues to shape the present. In the 11th century, Europe was a fragmented continent, plagued by internal conflicts and external threats. Christian kingdoms lived in constant tension, weakened by wars among nobles and struggles for power. Meanwhile, to the east and south, a formidable enemy was rising in strength. The Islamic world, led by powerful caliphates and sultans, expanding its borders, conquering Christian territories in the Iberian Peninsula, Sicily, and the Levant. Constantinople, the majestic capital of the Byzantine Empire, found itself increasingly pressured by the advance of the Seljuk Turks, who, with their fierce tactics and relentless determination, threatened to destroy the last great bastion of Christianity in the East. The West faced a crossroads. Either it united to combat this growing threat, or it risked succumbing, one kingdom after another. Tension grew as reports from the East spoke of persecuted Christians, desecrated churches, and the gradual loss of the Holy Land to the Muslims. Pilgrims who ventured to Jerusalem returned with stories of humiliation and hardship, inflaming religious fervor and outrage among Christians. The fear that Europe would be engulfed by this invading wave began to spread among kings, clergy, and peasants alike. The desperate appeal of Byzantine Emperor Alexios I Komnenos to Pope Urban II, seeking aid against the Turks, would be the spark that ignited one of the bloodiest and most transformative chapters in history. Christendom had to react, and the only possible response was war. In the year 1095, the Council of Clermont gathered a crowd eager to hear the words of Pope Urban II. Among nobles, knights, and peasants, the anticipation was palpable, but no one was prepared for the intensity of the speech to come. Standing tall, with eyes burning with fervor, the pontiff raised his voice and inflamed the masses, describing the sufferings of Christians in the East, the abuses suffered by pilgrims in Jerusalem, and the looming threat against Christendom. With words blending faith and duty, Urban II declared that God was calling upon his faithful to take up arms to liberate the Holy Land. The war against the infidels would not only be just but sacred, a penance that would ensure the remission of sins and eternal glory in the kingdom of heaven. The call resounded like thunder in the souls of those present, and, as if in unison, thousands responded, "Deus vult, God wills it." The square erupted in acclamations, and the promise of the Crusades spread like wildfire. Knights knelt, swearing dedication to the cause. Peasants enlisted en masse, and entire families prepared for the journey into the unknown. It was more than a war. It was a divine mission, an opportunity for redemption and conquest. Within months, fervor gripped all of Europe, and armies began to form, led by princes and lords who saw in the crusade not only a chance to fulfill their Christian duty, but also an opportunity to expand their power and influence. The West marched toward the East, not just with spears and swords, but with the conviction that they were writing a new chapter of history under God's blessing. The First Crusade was about to begin. The first Crusader armies set out for the East in 1096, but this was no ordinary march. It was an epic journey filled with trials, where faith intertwined with suffering and the brutality of war. The multitude answering Urban II's call included not only nobles and knights but also peasants, merchants, women, and even children, all driven by the promise of redemption and eternal glory. Many, however, were unprepared for the challenges they would face. Hunger and disease claimed thousands before they even reached the battlefield, and those who survived had to contend with betrayals, internal disputes, and the hostility of the peoples they encountered along the way. Religious fanaticism grew with each stage of the journey, leading to brutal massacres of Jews and innocent populations along the route, marking the Crusade not only as a sacred conflict but also as one of the darkest periods of the Middle Ages. Despite all difficulties, the Crusaders pressed on, and in 1099, they reached their ultimate goal, Jerusalem. After a prolonged siege, the Holy City finally fell under a bloodbath that would shock even the standards of the time. Christian knights, driven by religious fervor and a thirst for vengeance, massacred Muslim and Jewish men, women, and children indiscriminately. The Temple of Solomon became a river of blood, and even the Crusades chroniclers recorded that the conquerors advanced with their feet covered in the bodies of their enemies. But for the surviving Christians, this was the fulfillment of a divine destiny. Jerusalem was finally back in Christendom's hands. Amidst the dust and the stench of death, the knights knelt before the Holy Sepulchre, weeping with emotion and gratitude. The First Crusade had achieved its goal, but at the cost of carnage that would echo through the centuries. With the conquest of Jerusalem and the establishment of the Crusader states in the East, the need to protect the newly acquired territories and ensure the safety of pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land became urgent. It was in this context that the legendary Christian military orders emerged, composed of warrior monks who combined military discipline with religious fervor. Among them, the Knights Templar, Hospitallers, and Teutonic Knights stood out as elite groups synonymous with courage, strategy, and power. The Templars, easily recognized by their white robes adorned with a red cross, became the most famous, amassing wealth, political influence, and an aura of mystery that endures to this day. The Hospitallers, in turn, balanced war with the mission of caring for the sick and wounded, while the Teutonic Knights extended their influence beyond the Holy Land, consolidating their presence in Eastern Europe. The training of these knights was brutal, forging men who saw combat as an act of devotion. Armed with sharp swords and mounted on war horses, they formed the front lines of battles, resisting Muslim attacks and instilling fear in their enemies. However, their influence extended beyond the battlefield. The military orders quickly became economic and political powers, amassing vast fortunes and lands across Europe and the Middle East. Their power grew to such an extent that they inspired both admiration and envy, leading to conspiracies and persecutions, such as the legendary fall of the Templars in the 14th century. But while they lasted, these orders represented the pinnacle of the fusion between war and faith, embodying the essence of the Crusades. The quest for the Holy Land through both the blade and prayer. The Crusades left profound marks on history, shaping not only the relations between Christians and Muslims, but also influencing the politics, economy, and culture of both Europe and the Middle East. Constant contact with Islamic civilizations brought significant advancements to the West in fields such as medicine, mathematics, philosophy, and engineering, as Europeans absorbed knowledge preserved and developed by Arabs and Persians. Moreover, the intense trade between the two worlds strengthened Italian cities like Venice and Genoa, which grew wealthy by controlling Mediterranean maritime routes. This new economic dynamic was one of the factors that fueled Europe's commercial and urban renaissance, paving the way for the Age of Exploration. However, the Crusades also deepened religious rivalries and left scars of hatred and mistrust that lasted for centuries. The sack of Constantinople in 1204 further widened the schism between the Catholic and Orthodox churches, creating a division that persists to this day. The idea of a holy war left a lasting legacy, later used to justify religious and expansionist conflicts throughout history. Thus, far from being merely a series of medieval battles, the Crusades redefined global geopolitics, leaving an impact that still resonates today. And you? What do you think about the epic battles and the impact of the Crusades on history? Leave your opinion in the comments and suggest new topics for the channel. Your idea might be the next video.